Sometimes millennials get a bad rap for how they manage their money. The narrative has always been that they don't save, they're entitled, and they'd rather spend money on travel or avocado toast than build wealth. But is that really true? In today's episode, we're digging into what millennials really think about money and how their approach is different to other generations. Hopefully there's some intergenerational advice that will be helpful to anyone who's listening. Our guest is Jake Boulter, a senior advisor at Tribeca. Jake grew up in a family that spans 4 generations, from baby boomers to Gen Z, so he's well placed to talk about how money attitudes can shift across age groups. If you've ever struggled to see eye to eye with your adult children about finances, or if you're curious about how younger Australians are managing money in a changing world, this conversation is for you. That's today on Money and a Good Life. Hello, my name is Stephanie Coombs and I'm here with my co-host Ryan Watson. Ryan, I'm a millennial. Our guest is a millennial. You're Gen X. Are you ready to just be dunked on?
Hi, Steph. How are you? I thought it might go. There's some trepidation in this conversation, but for those who know it, it's fight, flight, freeze. So bring it on.
Okay, excellent. Well, I think that this is the best time to bring on our guest, Jake Boulter. He's a senior advisor at Tribeca and also a walking example of how millennials are doing money their own way. Hello, Jake.
Hi, Steph. How you going? Thanks for having me on. Hello, Ryan.
Jake.
You ready? Can we all, now that we're all sort of in this conversation, can we both agree that Gen X is the worst generation?
I don't have an answer for that one at this point.
See, I've already lost it.
My mum's a Gen X, and I do love my mum, so.
Told you he's a good guy. Told you he's a good guy.
Yeah, I think that Ryan is also technically Jake's boss, so this is...
That's it. So you started with that, Steph. So why is Gen X the worst?
Oh, because you're here.
Oh, right. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. I just wanted to...
There's some good journalism right there.
I never said I was a good journalist. I just said I was a journalist. Now, Jake, you've grown across 4 generations. What have you noticed about the different ways those generations relate to money?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Talking about this topic, obviously, in my household that I grew up in, my dad is a baby boomer, very responsible with money, very sensible man. My mum, Gen X, was, followed my dad's lead, I guess, more to the point. I was millennial, so up until recently, I thought we were Gen Ys, as in we always ask why. Why are we doing this? Why do we need to do this?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah. And that probably for me was spot on growing up. My mum and dad will both tell you that. And then my younger sister is a Gen Z. I think she is a lot more entrepreneurial than me. So watching that happen in the same household is really interesting.
That's interesting about Gen Z, right? Because, I think that they're the weirdest ones, I think, to put in a box. Like Gen Z, I am all about them. They're very fun, but they're kooky and they're hard to sort of pin down. I think the thing I'd sort of say, and this isn't necessarily about money, but what I think is the defining character trait of Gen Z is a total lack of sincerity. Like, nothing is very serious. And I think it's because they grew up serially online, and they've seen millennials do stuff that's cringe.
Yeah.
And so they can't be sincere. It has sincerity has left the building.
At Tribeca, we've looked at some research around this, and it's interesting where their risk tolerance sits. It's quite low as an overall. And I don't mean investing, I mean in terms of life.
Yeah.
And they don't like doing things that aren't proven to be done. So quite cautious and looking to take a lead, but proof has to. So for leaders have to demonstrate proof that something can be done largely before you get metaphorical buy-in.
I wonder why that is.
Yeah, interesting.
I can't help but think that it has something to do with the internet. That's my gut.
All roads.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But when you're online all the time and you have grown up serially online, you have seen what failure isn't a small I'm so glad that we grew up without TikTok and Instagram because oh man, the stuff that my thoughts when I was a kid were embarrassing, dumb thoughts, and as a teenager, embarrassing and dumb. But we could do that anonymously.
I'll sound like a real old guy
here. We go.
You know what I think is really embarrassing and dumb? Sitting in a restaurant or a cafe by yourself, filming your food or filming yourself doing something, because it didn't happen unless you film it.
Yeah.
But you sat there and doing it. Everyone can see what you do.
Yeah. No, it is. It's, and I think that has those sort of change their attitudes maybe to risk as well. This is not based on, this is just based on vibes, as they say. But we could have, growing up, we could have small failures that were sealed within our social, our real life network.
If you're at
Whereas
school,
if they do something embarrassing, it could go viral across the world.
and you could end up on news.com.
Yeah, and that sort of that, I think that sort of pressure to always be right would, I'm sure, have some sort of psychic imprint.
In a weird way, they somehow, that's what they want to happen as well. They want that viral exposure, but they want it to be good.
Yeah.
So I don't want to jump across generations, but I agree. I think taking photos of food and taking selfies or having the self-timer on and doing a dance in front of your phone it's got to be the most cringe thing I've seen happen. And unfortunately, see it happen quite a lot.
Each generation has their struggles. For millennials, I think that like the defining problem of our generation is housing instability. In most of Australia, the property market has bolted well before we could get into a position to buy. And then renting is also so expensive, so we don't have a lot of security there either. How do you think that this has sort of changed our attitude towards like money and wealth?
Yep. So I think that's a good point. Obviously depends on where you are in terms of the property market. I know where I grew up in regional Victoria, a lot of my friends, we all bought houses in our mid-20s because it was affordable and you could do it. But you've got to have the right level of income and be in the right situation to do that. So, capital cities I think are particularly tough. And so what we do is we look for other avenues to try and build that wealth outside of property.
Yeah. So if we could just pick that point up, Steph. So Jake, you talked about like you and your friend cohort and doing. So I imagine that good jobs, but discipline around saving, potentially lived at home for an extended period as well, not to pay rent as well. So there's that structure and there's some personal sacrifice in that too, right?
There is, yeah. And then obviously there's the guarantor things that take place as well.
Yeah.
But it's obviously a lot less onerous.
For our listeners, could you extrapolate out on that?
Yeah, so obviously a guarantor loan is where you will use someone else's property, usually your parents or a family members. They're able to access some equity in that to use as a deposit for your own purchase. So I know for myself, my parents helped me out with that initially. A great way to kind of get in without a deposit, without having to stump up money or be gifted money by relatives who may not have the cash to give, but they've got the property that they live in.
And if I could be so bold as to ask, is that something that you asked them or something they suggested to you? Because we're really trying to give multiple generations insight in this conversation, right?
Yep. So something that I asked my parents, or particularly my dad, again, he was a sense check on everything. Can we do it? Does it make sense? And, I think just having that discussion about why I wanted that to happen, to buy a property rather than rent somewhere, if you can lay it out, why it's beneficial for you, and again, how it doesn't work to the detriment of anyone else, then, I think that's the best way to go about that conversation.
How old were you?
24 or 25.
It's pretty young to be thinking about that.
Yeah, I'd moved out of home when I was, as soon as I could, 18 and a bit. Again, I was a Gen Y, so I used to ask why all the time, particularly when it came to some rules. So I rented from 18 to 24 and just, it was a hamster wheel kind of thing. And I thought, there's got to be a better way to do this. And, still going around to my parents every weekend for a roast. And I thought that was a great time to ask.
Yeah. I mean, like the rental situation, I think is pretty grim.
Especially in the capital cities, right, Steph?
Oh, it's just like the rent I pay for the place I'm in is criminal.
Steph, we've talked about this.
I know. It's just I have to get out of it. But your options are really if you want to. Not even if you would say to live in Mascot, you still have to fork out a fair chunk of. No offense to anyone who's listening in Mascot. Great place to leave from, but the money that you have to spend to live by yourself. So if you are single and you are renting, you've kind of got to have housemates to make it affordable.
Well,
that's your option.
This is something that we shouldn't gloss over. It's hard. Single and renting. It's almost not an option. At this point, I think that the people I know who are in my age group who are single are having to have housemates. Yeah. Because and I think that is going to be the case for an extended period of time, which I think it's not great. It's not great. Like share fridges, not. I'd like the share fridge thing is pretty bad, between
right?
18 to 24 in country Victoria.
And then at a certain point, I remember this is going back a few years, but when I was the last sort of bad share house I had, was I moved in and I was like, oh, you have the middle shelf of the fridge. Everything was sort of delineated by shelves. That's yours. And it's like, you just have to clean out first. And I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. I'll do that. Sort of like taking out, and as I went further back, it like the items on the fridge, carbon dated older and older, like I was an archaeologist, until I found a carton of milk that was out of date a year before a year out of date, had gone out of date a year ago. Like I could not comprehend how old this thing was. And when I sort of picked it up, it had this sort of gelatinous wiggle to it. And I was throwing this out, and I was like, if this goes, it's just going to be like, we're going to have to just burn down the house. It's
so you talk about the last bad share house, but surely there's a modern version of more of a sophisticated share house. Yeah,
that's it. Like that was at that point, I'm like, this is not a solution. Like that was, but still the people who were in that house, eventually it folded, were in their 30s.
What, you mean the house just fell over?
Could have been the milk.
Yeah, it could have been the milk.
I feel like off milk should be found more than a year. Earlier than a year out of date.
Well,
and do we think the previous tenant was a guy or a girl?
You know the answer to that. But this was the scenario. It was that was cheap because there are a lot of people in a place that was almost uninhabitable. And in Sydney, even if you're getting a 2-bedroom, you've got to have, like, you're still forking out a lot of cash for a 2-bedroom place. So there are better options, but it's still, there's not cheap. Cheap for housing, I don't think really exists.
And just along the same lines then, slightly off script here, Steph, but have you heard of instances where friends are buying properties together to live in?
I do, yeah. I have a friend. I have there's one person I know, and he was smart, him and his mate.
Yeah.
Got, like, I think just before the market got really bad, managed to get into this tiny, nasty little Surrey Hills terrace. But Surrey Hills were amazing.
On it, $28,000 a square metre.
Yeah,
Surrey Hills.
It was. But like this place was bad, but they were both handy, and so they went and sort of renovated it, and they've got a good sort of financial deal, and I think they're doing it again.
So they should have set up a TikTok and a YouTube channel, and they could
have monetized the whole process.
Exactly, yeah. That's how you get rich.
But sorry,
there
Steph,
we go.
I digress.
Yeah. No, but I think that is an interesting point, right? Like that's I would call that, by any other generation standards, a pretty non-traditional way of getting into property, but that's kind of what you need to do now, right?
It's a different version of compromise or sacrifice.
It is.
I think the narrative used to be that you shouldn't mix business and pleasure. So back, older generations wouldn't have done that with friends just in case it blew up.
Yep.
You don't want to have a bad financial outcome and a bad friendship outcome at the same time. Whereas I feel like today, millennials, Gen Z particularly, they're happy to mix. They want to do things together and build wealth together. And maybe that's a way to do it.
How are you guys seeing at the moment Gen X and also baby boomers helping their kids? Are you hearing more of those conversations at the moment?
Yeah. So for us, particularly we'll call it, say, the baby boomers, we're seeing more about how do they help their kids get into property. I think that's the key one that we're seeing more of. But in all honesty, Steph, I don't think we're seeing anywhere near enough of it. That's why I was really interested to ask Jake about how he had that conversation with his parents, or how it came about. We talk about all this wealth that's in the property market. How can you transfer at least some of that, or secure against some of that, to get the next generation into property? We talk a lot of the time, don't we, Jake, about living legacy strategies. So how can other people enjoy your wealth whilst you're still here? That's a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for me, that's changed a lot over the last 11 years since I started in the industry. It used to be that clients would have a goal to leave an inheritance to their kids. That's now merged into, well, how can we help them now, whether it's school fees for the grandkids or, guarantor loans, or whether it's gifting money ahead of time so that you can see your kids enjoy it. Yep. I think it's definitely happening a lot more. But, whether it's happening enough, I think it'll pick up a lot over the next sort of 5-10 years.
Well, I think it's going to have to, right? Because people, they're having to hold up their lives, really. Like I've got friends who have felt like they can't start a family because their housing situation is very unstable. And, if you want grandkids, then that might actually be something that's like, well, these people can't sort of...
That's an interesting lens. It's almost like a barter system.
Yeah, well, it's one way. It's like, well, if you want the family legacy, better pony up the cash. It's like, where's that house deposit coming from? But I think I can see how it must be hard to sort of part with such a large amount of money to that you've worked hard and have accumulated.
In my opinion, I think there's the qualitative element, parting with some money, but there's also, if you go guarantor like Jake discussed earlier, then it's just having the right financial security in place and making sure what happens if relationships break down, in terms of that property. But it's more about the qualitative element. We've discussed on this podcast around having money conversations. What happens then? Are there partners involved? It's far more about the emotions, I think, for people and a way that makes them feel, and they come around what happens, good, bad, or otherwise, than more of the quantitative side.
Yeah.
That, in my opinion.
And I guess there's also like the very important element of timeliness. I mean, the money coming to you when you're in your 30s, so you're not trying to crack into the market when you inherit, which is also not a happy time. But when you inherit the money, that's when, my financial life can now start because I can buy a house or whatever. But at that point, the market is further along. Your prime earning years are, hopefully your parents live a long time. Your prime earning years are over. Like that kind of needs to, ideally that money happens earlier on so you can build a life that means you're not reliant on it.
And if you're thinking about these older generations, across Australia, we've still only got 1 in 10 to 1 in 20 people in highly trusted ongoing financial advice relationships. So if you've got multiple generations that aren't in trusted advice relationships, they don't know whether their money's going to last. They probably don't have a heightened sense of security and freedom of choice. Therefore, they don't feel that they're in any position to help the next generation. They don't know about their own self or their own financial treasure, let alone helping someone else.
Well, we have spoken about that before, that interesting phenomenon where you're talking to someone and they're not aware of the fact that they've got a better financial situation than they think. Like they've ignored it so much and they're so anxious about it. And they're like, oh, hey, good news. You could have retired 5 years ago.
That's right.
Like that's something that's a phenomenon that you have witnessed more than once.
Yeah. We've talked before about how we work with a lot of people who are at forks in the road in their life. So whether that's redundancy, inheritance, divorce and the like, and even with an inheritance, that's people coming into new money, but then amalgamating that, for want of a better term, with their own money and then realising it's a different life stage or a different capability, and they still don't know what that means for the longevity of their money or how they can help other people.
Yeah.
I think it's important to go for the older generations as well, is that longevity of money. There is the qualitative aspects of why they want to give their kids money. As advisors, we can show them that quantitative aspects of it, which is your money's still going to last you until your life expectancy if you give your kids X amount of dollars, and show them that through that ongoing advice process.
This fear and this scarcity, it allows you to accumulate wealth, and you're probably quite conservative and you always spend less than you earn. It's about then what's the end in that conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, now how can we move to abundance or, support grandkids through private school or help kids get into first home, and then, like you said, literally create multiple generations off the back of that.
Right, and it will help too if the money is sort of dispersed, then that money will help create more money and more wealth as property equity increases and all this stuff. Yeah, so I think that there is I'm seeing more of it and I'm hearing more conversations about it. People looking at how they can help their kids now. I think that is going to be an ongoing trend. Another sort of interesting trend that I think has popped up is ethical investing. It used to just be, how can I make the most out of the money I've got? But now younger generations are a bit more interested in the ethics behind it.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on that?
My personal thoughts on that, look, I think it's great if, again, it's the emotional side of investing for someone. It's important for them to be invested in a way that they see as ethical and sustainable. I think a lot of companies, regardless of the investing side of things, are moving that way anyway, because there's a lot more that we can uncover about businesses now. If their business processes are not ethical or they're not sustainable or they're doing something wrong, someone will find out. This is, one of the beauties of social media and enhanced journalism, I guess, from a digital perspective. You can't really hide things anymore.
Yeah.
The pure ethical investing for me, I think, is, again, it's down to the emotions of it. It's, I don't think the returns will match like for like and be better off. But again,
Some people, that's a compromise they're willing to make.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So the fees are a bit higher. The returns might be a bit lower, but but if a client's feeling better about it when they go home and sit on the couch, then I think that's ideal.
We certainly saw a couple of years ago, Jake, didn't we? It was of greater importance to people. It was certainly heightened, seemed to have tailed off slightly, Steph. So it's relevant, but not as relevant as it was a number of years ago.
Who was it most relevant to?
Gen right. Like it was really important. So, 20s and the 30s and fair play, that social responsibility piece. But then cost of living, greater financial pressures, it's come back more to dollars and cents.
Put it all into evil. Is like
it was probably purpose and dollars and cents.
Yeah.
Now it's probably flipped and it's more dollars and cents and some purpose if we can have it.
It's complicated. I think that this issue is hard to track. It is really hard to track, and like where the line is and what is and what is strictly ethical and not ethical, and by whose standards.
That's right.
Unless
it's a big rabbit hole. Not in a negative sense.
No,
but
it is. But like,
it's as complex as you want to make it.
Yeah. A lot of millennials are getting their financial information at the moment not from the sort of traditional areas that you'd expect, like financial advisors. And I also think Gen Z are turning to social media to get their advice. Do you agree with that assessment?
I agree with that assessment. Yeah, I think they're getting a lot of advice on a lot of things from TikTok, social media, Instagram. I think that's undeniable. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you watch? Are you on social media at all?
I'm not. No.
Yeah. Right. Are you ever coming across, Ryan, someone on social media and you're sort of like fact checking or thinking about the advice it's giving?
Look, it's fair to say I'll probably start from a more conservative viewpoint in terms of what people's self-interest is. So I always look at what their background is, what their experience is, and within reason what their agenda might be. I'm really passionate about, financial education as a whole. So there are people with a noble purpose who are really looking to help. Unfortunately, a lot of the time when you peel back only a couple of layers, there's a few cracks in the armour.
I think the thing that you've got to sort of realise about social media is that the only economy that matters is the economy of attention. Like
it's a great way to put it.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the only thing that they're trying to do is get your eyeballs on their video for as long as possible, because that will hopefully get you to subscribe, and then you get numbers, and then you get brand deals, and then you get this. So the first 3 seconds are crucial, and that's how they measure when you're on an Instagram reel or a Facebook reel, the first 3 seconds.
Yeah.
3 seconds, and if you don't immediately have someone's attention, then you've lost them. That is not, I think, a great metric for responsible advice.
No, and it's interesting if you're, for want of a better term, Steph, if you're following particular people or you're turned onto particular channels, how that subconsciously, that's your education source, and that filters your view on how things absolutely look. I think there's a real positive piece about whether it's, AI or the internet as a whole, where people can source their own level of financial literacy until they're ready to get advice. But I think taking it for particular people who've no interest like self-interest, right, then that's where there's question marks for me.
And it's also like, if I was coming to you and I was like, you have to give me good financial advice, but you have 3 seconds to get my attention or I'm walking out the door, you'd probably that's nuts,
It is. Yeah.
Because you can't give people thorough or informed information about what they should be doing.
And, for those listening, I'd always look at what the person's actually trying to sell.
Yes.
I talked earlier about noble purpose. If they're an educator with a platform, and everyone's got to make a living, take that for granted. But I always go to the source and go what they're looking to sell, and then look at upstream in terms of what the narrative is and join the dots.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, anyone who starts a video with like, this is the one mistake you need to stop making now, or something like that, like it immediately gets your attention, right? But there's not one mistake. There's not one solution. There's not one piece of advice that's going to change everything.
It's fear-based selling, right?
Yeah,
As opposed to education. We know it's slow and steady wins the race.
Or what I particularly like about what you guys do, which is like, what do you want actually? And which is kind of the fundamental question is, what do you want? And then you can kind of unpick and form a life that makes sense.
It's the power of the question, right, Jake?
Yeah.
Exactly. The question, 2 ears, 1 mouth.
Yeah, but you can't get that. You can't actually sort of work out your own motivations for what you're trying to do. You can't get that from a 30-second video, I think. There's also a bit of a stereotype, I think, with millennials is that we're not really interested in more sort of traditional forms of investing, but we are very interested in like EFTs or crypto. Do you guys have to field conversations about crypto?
Yeah, every now and then, not as prominent as people would think. I think it's more of a pub conversation than it is an advice conversation. I think part of it is, the property and whether that's attainable for people or not. And if it's not, then they start to look at other things. ETFs, I think, maybe shouldn't be in the same conversation as crypto necessarily. I think, crypto is the quick wins. It's for, millennials. Again, we want to ask why. Why should we go down the traditional money path when we can have a centralized coin? Whereas ETFs just give you access to traditional investments, but you can start with a lot less and you can add to that over time as well. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that younger generations are moving to ETFs. I think it's a great way to start. And if anything else, it kind of pushes them to go down their own self-education piece as well with investing. And that's where they start. Who knows where they can end up.
Do you think that there are some lessons that older generations can take from millennials, or not? You don't look very convinced.
I'm not too sure what that would be.
I think if I could jump in here, I think millennials are very good at living for today.
Yeah.
And arguably, maybe there's less of a focus on tomorrow. So if you got your baby boomers a lot, probably thought a lot more about tomorrow, but maybe not as much presence or enjoyment today. So, I love the and, today and tomorrow.
Yeah.
Probably learn a lot from each other.
I think it's a good one. And I know on a previous episode of this podcast, our head of advice, Rob, was talking about, telling retirees to spend more. And I think it goes to this conversation where, they don't necessarily feel comfortable spending all this money that they've worked to save. So I do think you're right. I think living for today and spending your money for things that give you fulfillment is something that the older generations could do a bit more of.
It's a really interesting point because you think about, saving for retirement through superannuation. I think there's a really common misconception that when we pass away, that it almost should be the same balance as you started with. But superannuation is designed to turn into a pension to provide an income stream for retirement and within reason be depleted.
Should be zero.
Within reason.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people I've got to at least have what I started with, and potentially they sacrifice a lifestyle, especially in the first 10, 15 years, Jake, of retirement.
Yeah, I was going to say the balance should hopefully hold pretty still for your first kind of 10 years if it can. Spend what it's earning, keep the capital there. At some point you're going to deplete it, and it should be, I think it should be zero the day before you pass away, really, is what it's there for.
I agree. I do. And I think people also, and I only know this because, again, someone has said it on this podcast, but the point that you spend less as you do get older. So, in those early days of your retirement where you are hopefully in good health and you've got lots to do and there's lots of, a whole different kind of life that you can enjoy, that's when you should probably be a little bit more for the moment.
That's right. And then, if we had to pick an age, Steph, post, 75, life slows down a little bit.
Yep.
There's probably not the holidays that once were international or otherwise, potentially one car. Your life expenditure probably decreases to about 50% of what it did at the start of retirement.
Yeah. And I think that millennials, I think, live for the moment because they have had trouble accumulating wealth and accumulating property. And so I think that they're like, well...
Is that really the reason? Or is it, have they been through such... Oh, this is not a criticism. Have they been through such time of prosperity then it will always be okay?
I think my guess on it is that whether or not it's correct, but Australia was sort of built on the idea of having your own house and a backyard and a pool. And the
Great Australian Dream?
The Great Australian Dream, right? That was the whole deal. And the daily grind was, something that we all had to do. But the reward was the house with the pool. And when you don't have that, it's like, well, what's the point of the grind? Like you have no carrot, where the grind is never going to get you the lifestyle that you saw your parents have.
In some part, is just the tax you pay.
Yeah. And so it's like, well, look, you've got to go do a 9 to 5 and you have to work really hard. But ultimately the point is that you come home, you can live on one salary, you can have one parent staying at home with the kids, and you can have a nice car and maybe you can go on a holiday once or twice a year, which was pretty much
maybe
what a single...
Paradise.
which is a great place to holiday, which is actually where my family holiday.
There you go. Drive or fly?
Oh, drive.
Drive? Station wagon?
Oh, yeah. And just my parents trying to do something nice with the family while my siblings just shredded each other in the back seat for 12 hours.
I'm sure everyone listening can't.
No one knows what this is.
That at all.
But that was, a single income could actually give someone that thing. But as it stands now, you need both people working. You've got childcare. The house is, for a lot of Australians, if they want to live in a capital city where their job is not going to happen.
And we talked just earlier about in retirement depleting expenditure. You're not spending as much, right? We know that when you work, you're probably spending 15 to 25% of your income on associated work expenses, but we don't realise it, whether it's transport, clothes, food, and the life. So it's expensive to work.
It is, yeah, it is. And so I think without the ultimate reward of what was the lifestyle that was supposed to be the Australian lifestyle, I think that has created for millennials, and I also think for Gen Z, this larger sort of existential, well, wait, why are we doing this? If that is never going to be the goal, then and we're not going to have this property that's going to suddenly be worth millions of dollars when we're in our 60s or 70s, as it happened for other generations. Like, well, what is this? And I think that is actually a pretty big existential question that has led down a rabbit hole of, well, maybe we do things differently. Maybe we don't work as hard. Well, maybe we go and rent in a country town and run a bookshop.
Well, I was going to say one of the ways in terms of thinking differently, and Jake can talk to this about rent investing. So rent where you want to live, and then in an investment property somewhere else, whether it's in the state or in the country, right?
Is that what you're doing?
Not what I'm doing, but plenty of my friends doing very similar things. Living in Melbourne, particularly the trades, good work, good income here, renting here, starting to buy a few properties elsewhere in Australia that it is building wealth. It's doing a very similar thing, but they're able to live in Melbourne and enjoy that lifestyle as well at the same time.
Somewhat the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
They're in the market and they get to live where they want to.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a slightly less traditional way. It's kind of moving.
Yeah. Still on the property ladder.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think there's also just another portion of the younger generations who are just being like, well, maybe actually we kind of just tap out of this whole, this whole setup. Why don't we just not do it the way that everyone else has done
I'm not playing.
Yeah, exactly. Not fair, not playing. Yeah, exactly. And that's interestingly that's not just an Australian thing. It's a huge movement in Korea, also to a certain degree Japan, and China as well. This the lay down moment.
South Korea.
Yeah,
North Korea.
Different deal there. You are working. My goodness, you're working. But it's well, I don't think that this whole sort of setup is a reasonable setup. So we're just going to do something completely different and live a completely different life. And who knows what it's going to look like the generation below Z as well. That's going to be
And for what it's worth, I really like that as long as there's a plan and they have conviction. The thing that rolls me slightly, Steph, is the poor me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's you hate that.
I hate poor me.
hate that so much.
I think some of the millennials' attitude is almost the opposite of a poor me. So they grew up, to Ryan's point, they grew up. My parents never made me struggle for too much.
Yeah.
We did grow up in a really good time, and that's probably where our love of today comes from. And it's not the poor me, but it's just maybe there is some pausing that needs to be done, and there's a few overseas travels that need to be put on hold for 1 or 2 years. Because you're not living with your parents anymore. It is on you. You do have to go to work. You do have to save. You do have to rent. So I think it is a bit of that as well.
And there's a willingness in what you're saying to compromise.
Yeah.
Well, there's got to be some sacrifice. And we have talked on this podcast before, Steph, that's the value comes from the sacrifice.
Yeah.
It means more. Yeah.
And you guys as well, you don't advocate everybody just having a little suburban house and everybody doing the same job and everyone working 8 hours. That's one of the things that I resonate with you guys is that your message is you don't have to do anything to just accumulate wealth. That isn't the goal. The goal is actually just to live how you want to live.
What does the family unit look like in whatever form, and what are the goals, long-term, medium, and then what change do they want to create now financially?
I'd even say that's a slightly millennial attitude.
Controversial. I might tap out here.
Yeah. Jake, thank you so much for joining us
No
today.
worries.
That was a lot of fun. And if you did find today's episode helpful, follow Money and a Good Life wherever you get your podcast. We will be back soon with more real conversations about money and how you can make it work for your life. We'll see you then. Advice given in this podcast is general in nature and is not intended to influence decisions about investing or financial products. Our listeners should always seek their own professional advice that considers their own personal circumstances before making any financial decisions.